Zebra mussel showed up in Kansas in 2003, and since that time it's spread to 10 lakes across the state. And that spread's been kind of discouraging because with the exception of one of those 10 lakes, each one of those could have been prevented. Each one of them was introduced independently, where the other one was spread downstream. We've done a lot of boater surveys and try and indicate on how mussels are moving around, and it's become quite clear based on our risk assessment that boater movements is how zebra mussels are being spread across the state of Kansas.
That's great.
Invasive species management in Kansas has been a two-pronged approach, where we spend a lot of time on education and outreach, and then also on regulations and enforcement. And so we spend a lot of our energy on trying to inform our user groups on what the best practices are to prevent the spread of these species across the state. On the enforcement side, we have some regulations in place that prohibit the movement of species and require decontamination before you move equipment across the state. The inspection check lanes that we have across the state, they occur randomly, and it's a law enforcement operation, but its also main target is through education and outreach. So we spend time visiting with our boaters, talk to them about invasive species, zebra mussels, or even Asian carp, white perch, any other thing we're concerned about, try and get compliance with our regulations, and just spend time visiting with the boaters on a one-on-one level. In Kansas, we don't have the budget that allows us to expend a lot of money doing specific inspections for every boat in and out and things like that. So our program is mainly trying to get the information out, make it clear on what is required of those boaters before they move their equipment, or anyone else that's utilizing our natural resources, and to make sure that they are taking the right steps to prevent the spread of zebra mussels. Our outreach campaign in Kansas is focused on those user groups. We spend a lot of time visiting with marinas, with boaters, with anglers, with fire chiefs that are moving water around between our waters, with any sort of user group. Anyone that uses water, we try and spend time with them to try and inform about this issue and make sure that they're taking the proper steps to prevent that spread. We also do a lot of passive sort of outreach where we have signage placed at all lakes across the state. We have general signage that warn of the threats of invasive species, but then at an infested water we have clear signage that indicates that this is an infested water and the proper steps to take before you move your equipment. One thing is that we see anglers, for instance, that think that it's not a big deal or it's a good thing. And so if there's one way we can capture that. And then the other one is, I think for Kansas, we can make the point that we are an inland state. And so for any of these things to get to Kansas, someone brought them here. Well, as we've seen zebra mussels enter our state and spread within our state, there's been a change in attitude in how we look at things, where at first people just thought it was limited and localized sort of impact, but as we've seen it quickly spread, there's been some interest in trying to understand the dynamics of these populations. And one thing that's become quite clear is that no one in Kansas is protected from the impacts of zebra mussels or other aquatic nuisance species. Zebra mussels have not been in this state for very long, but one thing has become quite clear is that as these things continue to spread throughout our state, the environment is suffering, and so is our wallets. We're seeing an increase in cost as far as for water delivery systems, for power generation stations, for fire suppression systems. You know, people that move water are being impacted by this. It's not just a sportsman issue, it's far-reaching where it impacts every Kansan. Sometimes zebra mussels, when they're first introduced, people think it's a good thing. They are misinformed where they think that, yeah, zebra mussels are filter feeders, they're going to clear up the water. Well, here in the Midwest, we have very fertile waters, and they could be muddy or have plankton blooms on them. And although sometimes you will see a clearing of the water associated with the zebra mussel population, it's the next rain that comes down muddies it back up and clouds that water again. And so we're seeing a transfer of the nutrients from zebra mussels, pulling things out of the water column, placing it down on the bottom area of the lake and completely changing the nutrient cycle and dynamics. We have documented a decrease in the abundance of some fish species. We have documented a decrease in body condition of some of our sport fisheries. And so zebra mussels are not a good thing for fishermen. When it comes to management of zebra mussels or quagga mussels, there's a lot of difference in approaches by management entities. Here in the Midwest, a lot of our emphasis is on education and outreach. And as you move further west, you'll see programs where it's focused on more active boat inspections, on-the-ground sort of prevention activities at certain water bodies. And in the Midwest, it's been difficult to ramp up to that sort of level, and it's because of traditional values and how we use our resources in the Midwest is quite a bit different than how they're used in the West. One way is not better than the other. It's just a different approach which works differently with other audiences.
Yeah.
9 out of the 10 lakes that we have infested in the state of Kansas could have been prevented. Someone brought zebra mussels to each one of those lakes. It was not through natural spread. And that's the interesting thing about zebra mussels. This spread is preventable. It's not inevitable that these will be in every lake across the country. It just depends on how much resources we're willing to dedicate to this issue.